Kirk Frost has always worn the mask of a devoted husband and businessman, but behind the flashing lights and perfectly staged family photos, a storm has been brewing for years, and tonight, that storm finally breaks. In a shocking twist that nobody saw coming, Kirk himself has admitted to something fans have long whispered about, yet never had the proof to believe: a secret, long-running relationship with Jasmine Washington. That's right, the rumors, the late-night speculation, the behind-the-scenes whispers in Atlanta's tight-knit circle. It all comes crashing into reality with this confession. Emotions ran high as Kirk's words slipped out. Words that could shatter everything he has built with Rashida. Words that left even his closest friends stunned, and fans across the globe in disbelief. Imagine the betrayal, not just in private, but in full public view, where loyalty is currency and secrets are poison. What makes this revelation even more explosive is the timeline. This wasn't a brief fling, or a mistake swept under the rug. According to Kirk's own shocking admission, this was years of deception, years of juggling two lives, years of telling one woman she was his forever while whispering promises into another's ear. The family is now divided, old wounds are ripped open, and everyone is demanding answers. Was this truly love? Or was it manipulation cloaked in desire? Did Jasmine hold the power all along? Or was Kirk the master of a game gone too far? And where does this leave Rashida, the woman who stood by him through scandal after scandal, only to face the deepest cut of all? Tonight, we break down the receipts, the explosive conversations, and the fallout of Kirk's confession. Buckle up, because this is not just a story, it's a betrayal that shakes love and hip-hop to its core. The cameras had barely stopped rolling on the last season of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta when the whispers began creeping back into the spotlight, but nothing could have prepared anyone for the moment Kirk finally opened his mouth and laid it all bare. His tone was heavy, almost reluctant, yet laced with a strange relief, as though carrying the secret had weighed him down for far too long. "Yeah," he said, his eyes darting between Rashida's trembling hands and Jasmine's unblinking stare. "It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just one night, it went on for years." That sentence alone hit the room like a thunderclap. Rashida froze, her expression shattering into disbelief, while Jasmine leaned back, as though savoring the validation she had been waiting to hear for years. Emotions ran high instantly, voices overlapping, cameras catching every tear, every gasp, every accusation flung across the table. Fans would later describe this moment as the explosion of a bomb that had been ticking since 2017. The kind of television that sears itself into cultural memory. But for the people in that room, it was no show, was the unraveling of a family, the collapse of trust, the brutal confirmation of betrayal that had lived in shadows for far too long. Rashida's voice cracked as she finally found the strength to speak, her words tumbling out sharp and wounded. "So all this time, you were looking me in the eye, telling me I was your queen, your partner, while you were sneaking off, making a fool out of me, out of us." Kirk opened his mouth, but no excuse seemed strong enough to break through her fury. Jasmine shifted in her seat, her lips curling into something that was neither apology nor gloated, was something in between, a bitter recognition that she had been painted the villain for years, while Kirk had quietly fed her hopes with whispered promises. "Don't act like you didn't know," Jasmine said suddenly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You knew about me, Rashida. Maybe not all the details, but you felt it. You always did." Those words deepened the wound, suggesting not only deception but an insult to Rashida's intuition, a reminder of the countless nights she had doubted herself, only to be gaslit into believing she was overthinking. The betrayal was no longer abstract, it was alive in front of her, breathing, undeniable. The confession spread like wildfire. Social media lit up within minutes, with fans tweeting things like "Not Kirk admitting years with Jasmine," and "Rashida deserves so much better." Hashtags trended overnight, and suddenly, the entire city of Atlanta felt like it was buzzing about this single revelation. But inside that room, the world was reduced to a tense triangle of Kirk, Jasmine, and Rashida, with friends and castmates caught in the crossfire. Scrappy tried to interject, raising his hands like a referee desperate to calm the storm. But his words were drowned out by Rashida's sobs. Even young Jock, usually the one cracking jokes in tense situations, sat uncharacteristically silent, his eyes fixed on Kirk, like he was watching a man set fire to his own house. Every detail, Kirk admitted, peeled back another layer of betrayal. Late-night phone calls, secret trips disguised as business, holidays ruined because he had to step out for a meeting. That was really a rendezvous. Fans had suspected, of course, but the scope of it was what left jaws on the floor. "I kept it because I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep both worlds," Kirk finally blurted, his voice trembling, but instead of sympathy, the room erupted in disgust. Both worlds, Rashida repeated, her voice icy, the kind of calm that's more dangerous than a scream. So I was one world, and she was the other. Is that what my life is to you, a balancing act in your circus? Kirk tried to reach for her hand, but she recoiled as though his touch burned. Jasmine, emboldened now that the truth was out, leaned forward. Don't act like he didn't care about me, she said defiantly. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than a side chick. He told me things about our future, about what we could be if. Her words trailed off, but the implication was clear. If Rashida wasn't in the picture. Jasmine believed Kirk might have chosen her fully. That suggestion sent another shockwave through the room. The energy shifted from shock to rage. Rashida, who had fought for her marriage through past scandals, who had defended Kirk against critics, was now faced with the undeniable truth that all her loyalty had been repaid with deceit. Do you know what you've done to our kids? She snapped, tears streaking her face. Do you realize how you've embarrassed this family? How you've dragged us through the mud year after year while I stood there smiling, pretending everything was fine. The words landed like punches, and for the first time, Kirk looked genuinely broken. His bravado slipping away, replaced by shame. The cameras zoomed in on every twitch of his face, every flicker of regret. Because this was not just reality television anymore, this was raw, unfiltered collapse. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled, unsure whether to cut or let the chaos play out. The decision was obvious. This was the drama they had prayed for. The kind of unvarnished truth that guarantees headlines and ratings. But for the cast, it was brutal. Rashida's friends rushed to her side, whispering words of comfort while glaring daggers at Kirk. Even Sierra shook her head, muttering under her breath, "This ain't right. This ain't never been right." Meanwhile, Jasmine's phone buzzed nonstop as word of the admission spread. But she ignored it, her focus locked on the vindication of hearing Kirk finally claim their story in front of everyone. For her, it was a twisted form of victory, though the bitterness in Rashida's eyes proved that no one was walking away whole. The tension rose again when Rashida asked the question everyone had been dying to know. So, tell me, Kirk, how many lies did you tell me while you were with her? Was every "I love you" real, or was it just another cover-up? The silence that followed was deafening. Kirk stammered, his words falling apart, because the truth was too ugly to speak aloud. Jasmine filled the void, almost cruelly. "He loved me too." The declaration hung in the air, slicing through Rashida's last shred of composure. Fans watching from home would later replay that moment endlessly, arguing in comment sections about whether Jasmine was delusional or finally validated. But in the room, it was gasoline poured on an already blazing fire. Rashida stood up, her chair scraping across the floor, her chest rising and falling as she fought to keep control. "You disgust me," she whispered, her voice trembling but powerful. Kirk tried to follow her, but friends blocked his path, telling him to give her space. Jasmine crossed her arms, half triumphant, half bitter, as if realizing that her victory still came with isolation. The family was shattered, the cast was stunned, and the fans were left with their mouths hanging open. This was not a rumor anymore. This was not a storyline cooked up by gossip blogs. This was Kirk Frost, on camera, admitting to years of betrayal with Jasmine Washington, leaving behind a trail of devastation that no amount of apologies could repair. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more dramatic, someone pulled out their phone, scrolling through messages and whispering about leaked screenshots that could prove there was even more to this story than Kirk was admitting. The room tensed again, eyes shifting, because in Atlanta, one secret always leads to another. Rashida's footsteps echoed down the hallway as the cameras chased her, her face streaked with tears and fury. But what no one expected was that she wouldn't just walk out quietly. She spun around at the doorway, her voice cutting through the heavy air like a blade. "You think this is just about you too?" she shouted, her eyes burning into Kirk and then flicking toward Jasmine. "This is about every single person you lied to, every fan you paraded us in front of, every business partner who believed in us because we looked like a power couple. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed everything we built." The words made the crew fall silent, as if the weight of the truth pressed down on everyone in the room. Kirk's shoulders slumped, the reality of his own choices settling in. But Jasmine, almost defiantly, refused to back down. She stood taller, her voice trembling with equal parts rage and vindication. "Don't put this all on me," she snapped. "He came to me. He made promises to me. I didn't force him. If you're hurt, you should look at the man you married, not me." The boldness of her tone sparked gasps from those watching, and even some of the cast covered their mouths in disbelief. The tension exploded further when young Jock, unable to stay silent any longer, finally stood up and called Kirk out. "Brew, you've been sitting here lying to all of us for years," Jock said, pointing a finger straight at him. "We've been defending you, taking heat for you, and you had us out here looking stupid while you living two lives. That's not just betrayal to your wife, that's betrayal to your boys too." Scrappy nodded in agreement, adding, "Man, you played us all. You let us think Jasmine was just crazy, like she was making stuff up, when the whole time you were sneaking around. That ain't loyalty." The confrontation from his closest friends cut Kirk deeper than any headline could. For once, he couldn't hide behind his usual cool demeanor. His voice cracked when he tried to speak, the facade of control slipping. "I was scared, man," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Scared to lose Rashida. Scared to be judged. Scared to face the truth about what I was doing." But fear sounded like an excuse, and Rashida's sharp laugh from across the room showed she wasn't buying it. Social media at that very moment went into meltdown. Fans on Twitter flooded the timeline with posts like, "Jasmine really out here acting like she the victim," while others sided with her, saying, "Kirk played both these women, don't let him get away with it." Instagram lives popped up instantly as cast members' friends gave their own hot takes. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore, it was public property. Dissected by millions, every comment adding more fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, Rashida's mother Charlene stormed into the scene after hearing the commotion, her voice carrying the power of a woman who had warned her daughter for years. "I told you," Charlene thundered, pointing directly at Kirk. "I told you not to trust him. I told you he'd drag you down, and look at what you're dealing with now." Rashida collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing, while Kirk stood frozen, too ashamed to meet her gaze. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably, realizing that this was no longer about her validation. This was about an entire family breaking apart before the world's eyes. The drama only escalated when Rashida turned back to Kirk with one haunting question. "How many times were you with me? Telling me you loved me, while knowing you were going to her the next day?" Her voice cracked, but the force of her pain shook the entire room. Kirk hesitated, and that hesitation was its own answer. Jasmine, emboldened by the silence, muttered, "More times than you think." That single comment sent Rashida spiraling, screaming through tears. "Don't you dare talk to me like you know my marriage better than I do." The two women nearly lunged at each other, forcing security to intervene as producers shouted for calm. But calm was impossible in that moment. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw, and now the anger was spilling out uncontrollably. Behind the chaos, one cast member whispered to another that this wasn't even the full story. Rumors had been swirling for months that Jasmine had kept receipt sticks, voicemails, even photos that painted an even darker picture of Kirk's double life. When that whisper reached Rashida's ears, she stopped mid-cry and demanded answers. "Receipts," she yelled, turning her focus back on Jasmine. "You got proof? Show me. If you're so sure about what you had with my husband, pull it out right now." The challenge electrified the room, cameras zooming in as Jasmine pulled out her phone. A hush fell, the kind of silence that only happens when everyone knows the next moment will change everything. And with one swipe, Jasmine scrolled to a folder marked K. She smirked, holding the phone high. "You wanted the truth. Here it is." The air thickened, the weight of years of secrecy pressing down on everyone, as the screen glowed with message after message. Texts filled with pet names, plans, apologies, and promises Kirk had once claimed never existed. The betrayal wasn't just spoken now, it was written, undeniable, etched in digital ink. The cast erupted, Rashida's cries turned into screams, and Kirk tried desperately to snatch the phone before more eyes could see. But it was too late. The betrayal was out, not just in confession but in proof, in receipts that would soon spread far beyond that room, into the hands of fans, blogs, and gossip outlets eager to feast on the downfall of a man who thought he could live two lives forever. And yet, the room could sense that this was only the beginning, because once the first secret breaks, more always follow. Jasmine's phone glowed like a torch in the dim tension of the room, each line of text a blade slicing deeper into the fragile fabric of what was left of Kirk and Rashida's marriage. The words were there in black and white. "Can't wait to see you tonight. You make me feel alive. Don't tell nobody. This is our world." The room fell into an eerie silence as eyes darted between the screen and Kirk's trembling face. Rashida's breathing turned ragged, her voice hoarse as she choked out, "That's how you talked to her. That's how you made her feel. And all this time, I was at home raising our kids, building our businesses, defending your name while you were out here making her feel special." Her words landed with such weight that even Jasmine, for a fleeting moment, lowered her eyes as though recognizing the devastation her presence had caused. But the brief flicker of guilt quickly gave way to defiance. "Don't put this all on me," Jasmine snapped again, her tone harsher now. "He wanted me. He begged me to keep this going. Don't act like I'm the villain when your husband chose me." That line ignited the room like gasoline thrown on fire. The cast broke into chaos. Spice threw her hands in the air, yelling, "Nah, this is too much. Kirk, how you gonna stand here and let her say all this when your wife is breaking down right in front of you?" Carly Red, never one to miss the moment, leaned forward with her eyes wide, muttering, "I knew it. I've been saying it. This man got too many skeletons. Y'all didn't want to listen." Meanwhile, Scrappy shook his head in disgust, pulling at his chain as though the weight of it matched the weight of the betrayal hanging in the air. "You a cold man, Kirk," he said slowly, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You broke your own family for what? For some thrill? For some little side piece drama? Look where it got you now." Kirk finally broke, his voice trembling, his eyes glistening with tears he could no longer hold back. "I messed up," he confessed, his words tumbling out in fragments. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Rashida, I swear. I didn't mean for it to go on this long. It just got out of control." Rashida, her arms folded across her chest like armor, shot him a look that could cut stone. "Out of control?" She spat. "No, Kirk. A car accident is out of control. A hurricane is out of control. What you did was deliberate. You made choices every single day for years. Don't stand here and act like it just happened to you." Her voice quivered, but the fire in her eyes made it clear she wasn't going to let his excuses soften the blow. As the argument raged, the cameras captured every ounce of raw emotion. But behind the scenes, the producers whispered frantically, "This wasn't just television, Gold, it was a nuclear explosion." Already, TMZ had caught wind of what was happening, and bloggers across Atlanta were scrambling to piece together the timeline. But inside the room, none of that mattered. What mattered was the family being torn apart, the years of loyalty disintegrating in real time. Shirlene, Rashida's mother, couldn't hold back any longer. She stormed up to Kirk, her finger jabbing his chest as she shouted, "You don't deserve her. You never did, and now the whole world sees it. You ruined this family, and I hope you're proud." Her words echoed like a gavel slamming down, final and merciless. Jasmine, though, wasn't done stirring the pot. She leaned forward again, scrolling further down her phone, and pulled up a series of photos, grainy, intimate snapshots of dinners, nights in hotel rooms, even a blurry selfie of Kirk asleep beside her. The room erupted in screams of disbelief. Rashida's knees nearly buckled as she clung to her mother for support. "You took pictures," she cried out, her voice shaking. "You kept evidence like trophies." Jasmine smirked, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "I kept them because I knew one day the truth would come out. I wasn't gonna let him keep denying me, denying our relationship, acting like I was nothing." Her words landed with a twisted kind of logic. She had kept the receipts not just as revenge, but as proof of her own worth in a relationship built on lies. The cast members tried to intervene, voices overlapping as they begged Rashida to step outside, to breathe, but she refused. "No," she said firmly, her voice breaking but steady. "I need to hear every single thing. I need to see every single lie. If I walk away now, he'll just try to minimize it later. I need it all out in the open, in front of everyone, so there's no more excuses." It was a brutal decision, one that left the room bracing for more destruction, but Rashida's strength was undeniable. She was no longer the woman blindsided by scandal, she was the woman demanding the full truth, no matter how much it hurt. And then, just when it seemed the storm had reached its peak, Jasmine dropped a bomb that shifted the entire atmosphere. She looked Kirk dead in the eye and said, "Tell her what you told me about leaving her. Tell her how many times you swore you were gonna walk away from Rashida and build a life with me." The room froze, all eyes locking on Kirk, waiting for his denial, waiting for him to dismiss it as another exaggeration. But instead, his silence spoke louder than words. Rashida gasped, covering her mouth with both hands as tears streamed down her face. You were planning to leave me?" she whispered, the fragility in her voice cutting through the chaos like glass shattering on the floor. Kirk scrambled to explain, stammering about moments of weakness, about saying things he didn't mean in the heat of passion, but the damage was irreversible. Rashida's world was crumbling, and Jasmine, whether fueled by vindication or desperation, kept pressing. "Don't let him lie to you again. He told me he wanted me. He told me we had a future. Don't act like I'm crazy, he said it." Fans watching later would debate endlessly whether Jasmine was exposing the truth or twisting it for her own gain. But in that moment, her conviction made it impossible to ignore. The chaos spiraled into another eruption, Rashida sobbing uncontrollably, Kirk trying to hold her back, and Jasmine shouting over them both. Security stepped in again, castmates pulled people apart, and producers begged for calm. But calm wasn't coming. Not here. Not tonight. Because this wasn't just a scandal, it was the unraveling of years of lies. The collision of two lives Kirk thought he could keep separate forever. And as the dust settled in the corner of the room, the whispers started again. If Kirk admitted this much, what else was still hiding in the shadows? The answer hung heavy in the air. Unspoken but undeniable, more secrets were waiting to surface. And when they did, the fallout would be even worse. The room had barely begun to breathe after the chaos when a new wave of tension slammed through it. Kirk's own friends, people who had stood by him for years, were now questioning every choice he had ever made. "Man, you really played us," Scrappy said, shaking his head slowly, the disappointment plain in his voice. "All this time, you had us backing you up, defending you against fans, critics, anybody that questioned you, and meanwhile you were living a double life." Kirk's shoulders slumped, a shadow of shame crossing his features. He opened his mouth, but words failed him. The confession earlier had emptied him, leaving only the hollow shell of a man who realized too late that the world had been watching, judging, and recording every misstep. Meanwhile, Rashida's friends clustered around her, whispering words of support and encouragement. "You're strong," one said. "You've been through worse. You can survive this." But strength doesn't erase heartbreak. And Rashida's heart was fractured into pieces so small they seemed impossible to reassemble. Her gaze locked on Kirk again, icy and unwavering. "Do you realize what you've done?" she demanded. "Not just to me, but to our kids, to our family, to every person who ever believed in us. You've built this entire life on lies, and now everything is falling apart." Her words were like daggers, slicing through the pretense Kirk had tried to maintain for years. Jasmine, sensing the intensity of the moment, leaned forward, her voice softening only slightly. "Look, I never wanted to hurt anyone. I didn't ask for this publicity. I didn't ask for drama. But I also can't ignore what we had. He made promises to me. He made me feel real. And now you all want to act like I'm some villain. He chose to lie, not me." Her words sparked murmurs from the room. Fans later debated whether she was victim or co-conspirator, but in that moment, the dynamics were raw and unfiltered. Kirk's choices had created a reality where no one could stand unscathed. Then came the turning point. Rashida's demand for full transparency. She wanted proof, explanations, timelines, everything laid bare. "I want it all," she said firmly. "Every lie, every secret, every night you spent deceiving me. I need to see the extent of your betrayal." Kirk hesitated, guilt and fear colliding inside him. I don't know if I can," he murmured, but Jasmine, determined to show that she had lived through these years of secrecy herself, handed over her phone again. This time, scrolling through months of messages, voicemails, and snapshots that painted a vivid picture of the secret life Kirk had tried to hide. The room went silent as Rashida absorbed the evidence. Each message, each photo, each confession was a fresh wound, raw and impossible to ignore. Friends and castmates whispered amongst themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others quietly condemning Kirk's actions. "I can't believe he did this," one muttered. "He made all of us look like fools." The words hung heavy. A reminder that betrayal doesn't only affect the immediate family, it ripples outward, tainting relationships, friendships, and public perception. And then, amidst the chaos, Rashida found a moment of clarity. She stood tall, wiping tears from her face, her voice steady despite the storm around her. "You thought you could play with people's lives and get away with it," she said, looking directly at Kirk. "But secrets have a way of coming out. And now, everyone knows. Now, the truth is here, and there's no taking it back." Her words carried a weight of authority, a mix of heartbreak and empowerment, signaling a shift in the narrative. But just as the tension seemed to reach its peak, another bombshell emerged. A producer, hesitant but insistent, whispered that additional messages had been found on another device. Messages that suggested Kirk's deception ran even deeper than anyone had imagined. The revelation sent a fresh wave of shock through the room. Fans would later dissect this moment endlessly, speculating about the extent of the lies, the hidden truths still waiting to surface, and the potential fallout that could reshape the entire cast dynamic. In the center of the storm, Kirk finally lowered his gaze, defeated, while Rashida's resolve strengthened. Jasmine, caught between triumph and regret, realized that the validation she had sought came with consequences she hadn't fully anticipated. The family was fractured, alliances tested, and the public watching every move. What started as a confession had evolved into a full-scale unraveling. A dramatic cascade of betrayal, proof, and emotion that none of the participants or viewers would ever forget. The room was tense, heavy with the weight of truths finally spoken, yet the sense lingered that this was just the beginning. That more secrets and surprises lay hidden, waiting for the right moment to surface and ignite the next wave of drama. And so, the night stretched on, emotions raw and uncontained. As every party involved wrestled with the reality Kirk had brought into the open, the confessions, the evidence, the anger, and the heartbreak created a perfect storm. One that would dominate conversations, social media feeds, and fan forums for weeks, if not months. But the most pressing question, unspoken yet palpable, remained. After years of deception, could anything ever be the same? Or had Kirk's choices irreversibly altered the course of every relationship he had touched, leaving a trail of devastation that no apology could ever mend? The night continued with tension thick enough to choke, each second stretching into an eternity as Rashida struggled to process the avalanche of betrayal that had just been unleashed. The evidence Jasmine presented wasn't just a series of casual messages it painted a vivid timeline of secrets, stolen moments, and whispered promises that Kirk had shared, not with one, but two women, all while maintaining the facade of a loving husband. "You knew what you were doing," Rashida's voice cracked, trembling yet forceful. "Every day, every night, every light wasn't accidental. You planned this? You executed it. And now, here we are, living in the wreckage of your choices." Her words were a torrent, and Kirk could only lower his gaze, shame etched into every line of his face. Jasmine, standing firm despite the storm around her, added her voice to the growing chaos. "I didn't plan this," she said, her tone a mix of defiance and desperation. "I didn't want the drama, but I also didn't deserve to be denied. He made me believe, Kirk made me believe, that we had something real, and I held on to that because, unlike the world, he told me the truth, or at least his version of it." The tension was unbearable. Fans watching later would describe it as one of the most intense moments in reality television history, the kind that makes people question loyalty, love, and human nature itself. Behind the cameras, the crew whispered in awe and fear. This wasn't acting. This was the collapse of a carefully constructed reality, a family's private world shredded in real time. Rashida's friends clustered around her, whispering words of support, but even their comfort felt small against the tidal wave of pain and betrayal she faced. "You're strong," one said softly. "You've been through storms before. You'll get through this." But strength alone couldn't erase the devastation, the humiliation, the shattered trust, and the realization that the person she had loved and defended for years had meticulously hidden a parallel life. The atmosphere shifted when Rashida's mother stepped forward, her voice trembling with righteous anger. "Do you see what you've done?" she demanded, pointing at Kirk. "You've destroyed the trust of everyone who ever believed in you. All for what? For some thrill, some selfish desire." Her words carried a weight that silenced the room momentarily, even Jasmine pausing as the truth of Charlene's condemnation hung in the air. Kirk's defenses crumbled, his usual charm and quick explanations failing him completely. He opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to find words that could possibly repair the damage he had inflicted. And just when the room seemed to find a brief pause, Jasmine pressed further, revealing photos and voicemails that demonstrated the depth of the secret relationship. The images were candid, intimate, undeniable, a visual testament to the years of deception. Rashida's knees weakened, tears spilling freely as she clutched her mother for support. "You took pictures, kept proof," she demanded, her voice cracking. Jasmine held the phone high, her eyes unwavering. "Yes, I did. Because I knew one day the truth would come out, and I needed it for myself. I needed proof that I mattered, that he cared for me too." The statement was chillingly honest, a bitter reminder that deception had layers and consequences that reached far beyond the immediate players. The cast's reactions varied from shock to fury. Scrappy shook his head in disbelief, muttering, "Man, you played all of us. You lied to your friends, to your family, to your fans. And for what?" Carly Red whispered under her breath, shaking her head. "I knew it. I've known he had secrets, but this is worse than I imagined." The room was filled with voices, overlapping in confusion, anger, and disbelief. But Rashida stood firm, demanding clarity, wanting every detail laid bare. "I need the timeline," she said, her voice steady despite the torrent of emotion. "I need to know everything. Every lie, every moment you cheated. I want it all." Kirk's response was faltering, fragmented. I don't know if I can," he stammered. Jasmine interrupted, scrolling through months of texts and photos. revealing a meticulous record of meetings, late-night calls, and secret encounters. The evidence was irrefutable, and the gravity of Kirk's actions settled like a heavy weight in the room. Rashida's face alternated between shock, rage, and heartbreak as the scope of the betrayal became undeniable. And then came the final blow, the revelation that Kirk had discussed leaving Rashida entirely. Jasmine leaned in, her voice almost whispering but cutting through the tension like a knife. He told me he wanted a life with me. He told me he'd leave her. He told me everything I wanted to hear. Don't think I didn't know what I was part of. Rashida's gasp echoed, the reality of not just betrayal but premeditated intent crashing down on her. Kirk tried to speak, to apologize, but no words could mitigate the devastation. The family, once united, was fractured irreparably, the bonds of trust shredded, and the cameras continued rolling, capturing every anguished moment. As the night progressed, the ripple effects of the revelation spread beyond the room. Social media erupted with heated debates, fans dissecting every nuance, taking sides, and speculating on what the fallout would be. The story wasn't just about infidelity, it was about manipulation, betrayal, and the collapse of a public image carefully curated over years. The room itself felt suspended in chaos, a microcosm of the storm that was now spilling out into the world, proving that no secret, no matter how carefully hidden, can remain buried forever. The tension, heartbreak, and scandal were far from over, leaving everyone in that room and everyone watching to wonder just how much more devastation was yet to be revealed. The room was thick with tension, a suffocating pressure that seemed to crush everyone inside. Every heart beating faster with disbelief and rage, as Kirk's confessions hung in the air like smoke from a slowly dying fire. Rashida's mind raced as she tried to process the enormity of what she had just heard. Years of devotion, loyalty, and love had been shattered in a single revelation, and the foundation of her life had been rocked in ways she could not have imagined. Her hands trembled as she clutched at the edge of the table, knuckles white, nails digging into the polished wood as though holding on physically might somehow steady the storm inside her chest. Each glance at Kirk revealed a mixture of guilt, shame, and fear in his eyes. A man exposed in a way he had never anticipated, stripped of the armor of charm and control he had used to navigate both worlds for years. Jasmine stood nearby, her own posture rigid with triumph and defiance, a living testament to the hidden life that had remained secret for far too long. Proof that the man who had portrayed himself as devoted had been weaving a web of lies and betrayal in plain sight. The interplay of emotions in the room was dizzying. Shock, anger, sadness, and disbelief collided with a force so raw that it left the air electric and unstable. Every exhale, every whispered word, and every movement magnified under the scrutiny of cameras, friends, and family members who were now forced to witness the unraveling of a narrative they had long taken for granted. The text messages and photographs that Jasmine had revealed were more than mere evidence. They were artifacts of deception, chronicling a parallel life filled with promises, secret rendezvous, and intimate moments that Kirk had shared with her while maintaining the facade of a perfect husband, father, and public figure. The magnitude of this exposure was staggering. A catalog of duplicity that would dominate conversations and headlines for months, perhaps years, leaving fans, critics, and even casual observers questioning every carefully staged photograph, every scripted television moment, and every public declaration of love that Kirk had made over the years. The revelations sent ripples through the room, each wave more destructive than the last. Rashida's voice broke as she demanded accountability, her tone oscillating between grief and fury. "How could you do this to me? To our children, to everyone who trusted you?" Her words were not rhetorical. They demanded answers, demanded confrontation, and demanded a reckoning that could no longer be postponed. Kirk's attempts at explanation were halting, fragmented, and inadequate, his carefully constructed defenses crumbling under the weight of undeniable evidence and the searing gaze of the woman whose life he had upended. Each admission he made seemed to ignite a fresh spark of outrage, a reminder of the deliberate choices he had made. Choices that had violated trust, respect, and the bonds that hold a family together. Jasmine's voice interjected repeatedly, alternating between defensive insistence and pointed accusations, asserting her own perceived role as a participant rather than an instigator, framing herself as someone who had been drawn into a situation created entirely by Kirk's duplicity. Her defiance and visible vindication only intensified Rashida's pain, highlighting the depth of manipulation and betrayal that had been orchestrated behind closed doors for years. Friends and cast members attempted to intervene, offering support, comfort, and perspective, yet their words often fell short, unable to bridge the chasm that had opened in the wake of Kirk's revelations. Scrappy's disappointment was palpable as he addressed Kirk, his voice laced with disbelief and condemnation. "You played all of us. You let everyone defend you while you were living this secret life. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" His words echoed throughout the room, resonating as both accusation and lament, a testament to the ripple effects of betrayal that extend far beyond the immediate parties involved. The evidence Jasmine produced, the messages, photographs, and recordings provided a meticulous timeline of secrecy and deception, each item a damning confirmation of the long-suspected rumors that had circulated quietly in the background of the cast's interactions and public appearances. Rashida's reactions were a mix of visceral heartbreak and calculated determination, her body language alternating between collapse and assertive demand, signaling a complex negotiation between grief, rage, and the necessity of confronting the reality before her. The room itself seemed to contract under the intensity of the unfolding drama. Every gesture, every glance, and every word carried amplified significance, magnified by the cameras that would transmit this intimate implosion to audiences hungry for scandal and revelation. Social media exploded as news of Kirk's confession and Jasmine's corroborations spread, fans dissecting each moment, debating allegiances, and speculating on the broader implications for the cast, the family, and the show itself. The public reaction mirrored the intensity inside the room, a digital extension of the chaos, creating a feedback loop where exposure begets attention, attention begets scrutiny, and scrutiny amplifies every emotional fracture already present. The gravity of the situation intensified when Rashida demanded a full timeline of Kirk's infidelity, insisting on understanding the scope, frequency, and circumstances of his betrayal. Each disclosure added layers of complexity and pain, revealing patterns of manipulation, secrecy, and emotional exploitation that underscored the deliberate nature of Kirk's actions. Jasmine's contributions, while affirming her own experiences, served to complicate the narrative, demonstrating that the consequences of betrayal are rarely linear, affecting multiple lives simultaneously and generating cascading emotional repercussions. Kirk's attempts to contextualize his actions, to explain motivations or to plead for forgiveness, were consistently undercut by the incontrovertible evidence and the searing emotional responses of those he had harmed. His statements, while intended to convey remorse or justification, often served to highlight the depth of his illustrating a profound disconnect between intention and impact, between perception and reality. The room oscillated between confrontation and revelation, each moment punctuated by intense emotional exchanges that illuminated the intricate web of relationships, loyalties, and deceptions that had defined the social and familial ecosystem surrounding Kirk. Rashida's capacity to maintain composure amid this maelstrom demonstrated resilience, a refusal to allow the chaos to completely consume her agency. Even as grief and anger coursed through her, she demanded transparency, accountability, and unflinching honesty, recognizing that without these elements, reconciliation or understanding would remain impossible. Kirk's acknowledgement of discussions about leaving Rashida entirely constituted a turning point, magnifying the betrayal and introducing existential questions about commitment, trust, and the ethical boundaries of personal relationships. The implications of these admissions extended beyond the immediate triad of Kirk, Rashida, and Jasmine, affecting friends, colleagues, and the broader audience who had invested emotionally in the public narrative of their lives. Each revelation intensified the scrutiny and heightened the emotional stakes, reinforcing the precariousness of reputations built on partial truths or concealed transgressions. The presence of cameras, producers, and social media magnified every interaction, creating a metanarrative in which the act of revealing became inseparable from its broadcast, and where private pain was transformed into collective spectacle. The interplay between public perception and private reality underscored the complexities inherent in lives lived under scrutiny, highlighting how deception, once uncovered, resonates across multiple spheres simultaneously. Rashida's insistence on confronting every detail functioned as both a coping mechanism and a method of reclaiming agency, an attempt to assert control over a narrative that had been hijacked by deception for years. The accumulation of confessions, evidence, and emotional outbursts produced a dense atmosphere of moral reckoning, where accountability was demanded not only for actions themselves, but for the sustained patterns of manipulation that allowed the deception to persist. Kirk's fluctuating expressions of guilt, shame, and defensiveness revealed the psychological burden of long-term duplicity, illustrating how sustained deceit erodes not only relationships but self-perception and moral orientation. The tension reached further levels when Jasmine, empowered by validation, prompted Kirk to disclose specific instances, each revelation layering additional complexity onto an already intricate web of emotional damage. Rashida's reactions ranged from disbelief to visceral anguish, her responses demonstrating the non-linear nature of processing trauma and betrayal. Cast members and friends oscillated between support, condemnation, and disbelief, highlighting the multidimensional impact of sustained dishonesty on social networks and personal alliances. The combination of confessions, evidence, and emotional confrontation created a narrative that was as riveting as it was tragic, blending elements of personal failure, interpersonal conflict, and public spectacle into a cohesive but chaotic tableau. Fans and observers, both within the room and across digital platforms, were confronted with a narrative that defied easy categorization. It was simultaneously a tale of personal betrayal, a study in human emotion, and a demonstration of the unforeseen consequences of secrecy and deception. Rashida's capacity to articulate the moral and emotional dimensions of the betrayal positioned her as both victim and moral compass, guiding viewers and participants through the turbulent landscape of revelation, anger, and accountability. The unrelenting exposure of evidence, the rawness of unfiltered emotion, and the relentless pressure of public scrutiny culminated in a scenario where every participant was forced to confront the consequences of actions taken years prior. The intricate interplay of confession, corroboration, and emotional response revealed the full scope of the human cost of duplicity, creating a narrative of psychological, relational, and social ramifications that extended far beyond the immediate context of Kirk, Rashida, and Jasmine. Throughout the unfolding drama, the room functioned as both stage and crucible, refining and revealing character, morality, and relational dynamics under conditions of extreme stress and scrutiny. The complexity of the situation, amplified by the presence of cameras, friends, family, and social media, transformed a private betrayal into a public event with layered consequences, emotional resonance, and cultural significance. The confrontation, evidence, and raw emotion served as a case study in the long-term ramifications of secretive behaviors, illustrating how sustained deception can simultaneously fracture personal relationships, challenge ethical norms, and produce widespread social discourse. Kirk's journey through confession, denial, and reluctance. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension as the weight of Kirk's confessions pressed down on everyone present, an invisible but unmistakable force that seemed to distort time itself, each second stretching longer than the last, punctuated by the sound of Rashida's trembling voice, the shuffling of feet, and the occasional gasp from castmates and friends who were struggling to process the gravity of what had just been revealed. Kirk, once a figure of control and charm, now seemed diminished, his usual confidence replaced by a frailty that mirrored the emotional wreckage around him. The intimate world he had carefully curated, a life of public admiration, family devotion, and social stature, had been fractured, leaving raw edges exposed, vulnerable, and impossible to ignore. Jasmine, standing as both accuser and participant in this turbulent drama, held her phone like a talisman, each screen swipe a reminder of years of clandestine communication, secret meetings, and whispered promises that had existed in the shadows, while Rashida, unknowingly, maintained her role as devoted wife, mother, and partner. The messages she revealed were meticulous, deliberate, and undeniable, intimate snapshots, late-night texts, and voicemails that detailed a parallel existence, a narrative of connection and seduction that had been kept hidden from the public eye and, more devastatingly, from Rashida herself. Each new revelation cut deeper than the last, and the emotional responses were immediate, visceral, and uncontrollable. Rashida's face alternated between shock, disbelief, and profound grief as she absorbed the implications of the evidence, her hands clutching at her chest as though to physically contain the breaking of her heart. "How could you?" she finally demanded, her voice a mix of anger and despair. "How could you do this to me, to our children, to everyone who believed in us?" The room seemed to hold its breath in response, the cameras capturing every nuance, every tremor, every tear, ensuring that the unfolding drama would be preserved in painstaking detail for an audience that would later dissect, analyze, and replay every moment. Kirk's attempts at explanation were fragmented and ineffective, stammering and halting, each word underscoring the inadequacy of his defenses against the mountain of evidence and emotion that now dominated the space. He tried to explain weakness, temptation, and poor judgment, but nothing could mitigate the reality that his actions had been deliberate, sustained, and devastating in scope. The interplay between guilt and defensiveness painted a complex portrait, of a man who had underestimated the consequences of long-term deception, a man who had allowed desire and duplicity to override commitment and integrity, and who now faced the full force of accountability in real time. Jasmine's voice punctuated the tension, oscillating between defensive justification and pointed accusation, emphasizing that while she was implicated by proximity and participation, the responsibility for orchestrating this web of betrayal lay squarely with Kirk. She pressed him for specific admissions, highlighting the calculated nature of his duplicity and forcing him to confront the full extent of the harm he had inflicted. The room, a microcosm of social and familial networks, reflected the cascading effects of betrayal. Friendships strained, alliances tested, and public perception destabilized. Scrappy's condemnation was particularly cutting, his disappointment amplified by the intimate knowledge of Kirk's character, his words carrying both moral weight and personal frustration. "You let us all defend you, champion you, while you were living this secret life. How could you?" Carly Red's whispered commentary echoed similar disbelief, underscoring the shockwave that this revelation sent through their tightly knit community. Rashida's demand for transparency intensified as the night wore on. She insisted on a complete timeline of deception, desiring clarity on every instance, every lie, and every moment Kirk had spent cultivating a secret relationship. This insistence functioned as both a coping mechanism and a tool for regaining agency, allowing her to reconstruct a narrative that had been violently disrupted by betrayal. Each disclosure layered additional emotional complexity, as patterns of manipulation and secrecy were revealed, demonstrating the premeditated nature of Kirk's actions and the depth of emotional exploitation experienced by those deceived. The room's atmosphere was further complicated by the presence of cameras and producers, who were not merely passive observers but active participants in the shaping of this narrative. Their direction, presence, and prompting influenced the pacing and intensity of interactions, ensuring maximum exposure of emotion, reaction, and confession. This interplay between private agony and public spectacle created a dynamic in which the participants' experiences were inseparable from their representation, magnifying every emotional fracture and ethical breach. Social media immediately became an extension of the room, a digital arena where fans, critics, and casual observers dissected every word, action, and gesture. The confession's reach extended beyond the physical space, amplifying the consequences of deception and creating a feedback loop where exposure prompted discussion. Discussion generated further scrutiny, and scrutiny intensified emotional stakes for the participants. The interplay of confession, corroboration, and evidence created a multi-layered narrative, one in which individual accountability, relational dynamics, and public perception were inextricably intertwined. Kirk's acknowledgement of prior discussions about leaving Rashida altogether constituted a critical escalation, transforming a story of infidelity into a narrative of existential betrayal and moral failure. The implications for family cohesion, friendship, networks, and public trust were profound, extending beyond immediate participants and into the broader socio-cultural sphere in which these individuals operated. Rashida's responses, a complex mixture of grief, anger, and resolve, served to anchor the emotional narrative, providing both clarity and moral framing for viewers attempting to navigate the intricate web of actions, intentions, and consequences. The continuous revelations compounded emotional intensity, producing a psychological pressure cooker in which the participants' resilience, vulnerability, and interpersonal dynamics were laid bare. Jasmine's contributions, while affirming her own experience, also highlighted the multifaceted impact of betrayal, showing how deception can simultaneously empower, victimize, and destabilize multiple parties. Kirk's fluctuating displays of remorse, shame, and defensiveness illustrated the internal consequences of sustained deceit, highlighting the interplay between self-perception, ethical judgment, and the psychological toll of living a double life. Each exchange, revelation, and emotional response intensified the sense of moral reckoning, reinforcing the inescapability of truth once concealed actions are brought into the open. The room became both crucible and theater, a space where private lives collided with public exposure, forcing participants to confront the immediate and long-term ramifications of their actions. Rashida's insistence on full disclosure operated as a form of agency reclamation, a method of establishing control in an environment dominated by betrayal and deception. The accumulation of confessions, corroborative evidence, and raw emotional display functioned as a comprehensive narrative of relational dynamics, ethical breach, and the consequences of duplicity. As the evening progressed, the interconnected consequences of actions taken years prior became increasingly apparent, illustrating how sustained deception generates cascading effects across multiple relational, social, and cultural domains. The interplay between confession, emotional response, and public scrutiny created a layered narrative, demonstrating the complexity of human behavior under conditions of ethical violation and relational betrayal. Kirk's navigation of guilt, shame, and defensive reasoning further highlighted the psychological complexity inherent in sustained dishonesty, providing insight into the internal and external pressures that converge in situations of long-term deceit. Rashida's capacity to articulate and respond to these dynamics underscored her role as both moral arbiter and emotional center, guiding the narrative through grief, confrontation, and the demand for accountability. The magnitude of revelation, intensified by media presence and social amplification, transformed a private betrayal into a multidimensional event, with psychological, relational, and societal implications. Every interaction, confession, and piece of evidence contributed to a dense and multifaceted tableau, illustrating the extensive reach of secretive behaviors and the profound consequences of sustained deception in personal and social spheres. The intensity of the unfolding drama, compounded by the continuous flow of evidence, emotional confrontation, and social scrutiny, underscored the intricate dynamics of betrayal, accountability, and moral reckoning, revealing the complex interplay between individual actions, relational networks, and public perception in situations of sustained dishonesty and personal betrayal. Rashida's demands for clarity, accountability, and transparency functioned as both a coping mechanism and a method of moral adjudication, illustrating how individuals negotiate power, agency, and ethical judgment in the context of relational collapse. The cascading effects of confession, corroboration, and public scrutiny provided a compelling case study of the psychological, relational, and social ramifications of duplicity, demonstrating how concealed actions, once revealed, produce widespread consequences that extend far beyond the immediate circle of participants. The emotional landscape of the room was complex and continuously evolving, with grief, anger, shock, and disbelief interacting dynamically, shaped by the presence of cameras, the immediacy of evidence, and the moral imperatives articulated by those betrayed. The prolonged exposure to truth, evidence, and emotional confrontation functioned as a crucible, intensifying emotional responses and highlighting the multifaceted impact of deception on individuals, relationships, and broader social perception. Through the interplay of confession, evidence, and emotional response, the narrative unfolded with relentless intensity, offering insight into the complex consequences of betrayal, the psychology of duplicity, and the intricate dynamics of human relationships under conditions of moral and emotional strain. Every revelation, every tear, and every declaration contributed to a densely woven tapestry of emotional and moral consequence, capturing the intricate and often devastating effects of sustained deceit and relational betrayal on personal identity, social networks, and public perception, ultimately producing a scenario in which accountability, emotional integrity, and moral reckoning were unavoidable and irrevocably intertwined. The atmosphere in the room was nearly unbearable, a dense, suffocating tension that seemed to press down on everyone present, leaving no space for calm, no room for reflection, only the raw and immediate impact of Kirk's confessions and the undeniable evidence that Jasmine had provided, each piece a meticulous record of years of secrecy, hidden desires, and intimate betrayals that had occurred in the shadows while Rashida remained committed, loving, and unaware, her trust given freely and now shattered in a way that was impossible to mend. The gravity of the situation was amplified by the presence of cameras, crew members, and producers, who captured each moment, not as passive observers but as active participants, ensuring that every glance, every tremor, every word of despair or accusation would be broadcast, dissected, and immortalized for audiences who had long invested emotionally in the lives of these individuals, projecting their own expectations, judgments, and hopes onto the unfolding drama. Rashida's expression oscillated between profound grief and searing anger, a duality that reflected the impossibility of reconciling the love she had felt with the deliberate and repeated deception that Kirk had orchestrated over years, a betrayal that extended far beyond infidelity to encompass manipulation, secrecy, and the emotional exploitation of everyone involved, including friends, castmates, and the broader public who had been drawn into the narrative of their lives through television and social media. Jasmine, on the other hand, stood with a complex mix of vindication and defensiveness, her posture rigid with the awareness that she had been both a participant in and a witness to this long-hidden reality. Her evidence, messages, photographs, and voicemails forming a chronological map of the duplicity that had been carefully concealed, yet now lay bare in brutal clarity, forcing all present to confront the multifaceted consequences of sustained deception. The interplay between guilt, shame, defensiveness, and defiance created an electric environment where the emotional stakes were nearly unbearable, each participant forced to navigate the intricate web of relationships, moral responsibility, and public perception simultaneously. A task made all the more daunting by the presence of recording equipment and the knowledge that viewers would later scrutinize every detail, assigning blame, sympathy, and judgment with relentless intensity. Rashida's voice cut through the tension repeatedly, demanding clarity, accountability, and comprehensive disclosure. Her insistence on understanding the full scope of Kirk's betrayals functioning as both a coping mechanism and an assertion of agency, a way to reclaim control in a scenario where she had been systematically deceived and manipulated, her identity, trust, and emotional investment weaponized against her by someone she had loved unconditionally. Each revelation intensified the room's emotional pressure, as friends and cast members weighed in, offering support, condemnation, or disbelief, their own reactions forming a chorus of moral and emotional judgment that reinforced the gravity of the exposure, reminding Kirk and Jasmine alike that the consequences of deception are rarely confined to the private sphere, instead radiating outward to affect entire social networks and public perception in ways that are both immediate and enduring. Scrappy's words were sharp and unyielding, a combination of personal disappointment and moral censure. You let us all defend you, champion you, while you lived this other life. Did you ever consider the people who trusted you, the friends who believed in you? His condemnation, echoed in subdued but equally powerful tones by Carly Red and other castmates, created a network of accountability that extended beyond the immediate participants, highlighting the ripple effects of sustained betrayal and the social consequences of living a dual existence. As the night progressed, the tension only deepened. Jasmine pressed Kirk further, insisting on specific confessions and demanding that he acknowledge the deliberate nature of his actions, their timing, and the decisions he had made that had allowed this deception to continue uninterrupted for years. Each admission brought with it an additional layer of complexity, a new dimension of emotional fallout that forced Rashida to navigate the intersecting currents of grief, rage, and the need for clarity, all while under the scrutiny of those around her and the ever-present cameras documenting the unraveling narrative. Kirk's attempts at explanation, justification, or pleading for forgiveness were repeatedly undermined by the incontrovertible evidence, the meticulous timeline Jasmine had assembled, and the raw emotional response of the betrayed, leaving him exposed in a way he had never anticipated. His public persona and private integrity simultaneously eroded by actions he had long presumed could remain hidden. The continuous flow of revelations, evidence, and emotional confrontation created a crucible-like environment in which the participants' psychological, relational, and moral capacities were tested to their limits, each new disclosure acting as a catalyst for further reflection, conflict, and emotional expression, demonstrating how deception, once uncovered, generates cascading effects that reverberate across multiple spheres of human interaction. Rashida's insistence on transparency and accountability functioned as both a mechanism for personal empowerment and a means of moral arbitration, compelling Kirk to confront not only the immediate consequences of his behavior but also the broader ethical implications, the relational damage, and the long-term ramifications for social, familial, and public trust. The presence of Jasmine, as both corroborator and participant, added further complexity, highlighting how acts of deception create intricate networks of relational, emotional, and social consequences that extend well beyond the individuals directly involved, influencing the perceptions, loyalties, and moral evaluations of all those who intersect with the situation. Kirk's internal struggle was evident, his fluctuating expressions of guilt, shame, defensiveness, and occasional remorse revealing the psychological weight of long-term duplicity and the cognitive dissonance inherent in maintaining a double life, particularly when confronted with irrefutable evidence and the intense emotional reactions of those he had wronged. The unfolding drama demonstrated how betrayal operates not merely as an isolated act but as a sustained process with cumulative effects, shaping interpersonal dynamics, altering social perceptions, and generating complex ethical questions that are difficult, if not impossible, to resolve neatly. The emotional landscape of the room was intricate and constantly shifting, with grief, anger, disbelief, and moral outrage interacting in dynamic ways that mirrored the multifaceted consequences of sustained deception. Illustrating the profound impact of hidden behaviors on human relationships, social cohesion, and public perception. The prolonged exposure to truth, evidence, and confrontation created an environment in which every participant's psychological resilience, relational judgment, and moral reasoning were rigorously tested, forcing an engagement with the reality of human fallibility, the complexity of ethical accountability, and the enduring consequences of dishonesty. Rashida's capacity to articulate the moral, emotional, and relational implications of the betrayal positioned her as both moral arbiter and central emotional figure, guiding the narrative through a complex terrain of grief, confrontation, and the pursuit of clarity, while Kirk navigated the intersecting pressures of public scrutiny, personal guilt, and relational fallout, illustrating the intricate interplay between action, consequence, and perception in a context dominated by sustained deception. Each piece of evidence, every confession, and every emotional outburst contributed to a dense, interconnected tableau of human behavior, moral consequence, and relational complexity, revealing how the exposure of long-hidden secrets triggers multifaceted reactions that extend far beyond the immediate moment, reshaping interpersonal dynamics, social networks, and public narratives in profound and often unpredictable ways. The night's events exemplified the intricate consequences of duplicity, illustrating how private actions, when revealed, generate complex cascades of emotional, social, and ethical ramifications, affecting not only those directly involved but also the broader networks in which they operate, and demonstrating that sustained deception carries consequences that are both immediate and enduring, deeply personal and widely social, profoundly emotional and rigorously ethical, creating a scenario in which accountability, reflection, and relational negotiation are unavoidable and irrevocably intertwined. The emotional, moral, and relational stakes escalated further as additional messages, photos, and voicemails were introduced, each piece of evidence adding clarity, complexity, and further emotional weight, intensifying Rashida's processing of grief and betrayal while simultaneously compelling Kirk to confront the cumulative consequences of his actions in real time. The room became a crucible in which personal integrity, relational trust, and moral judgment were continuously tested, highlighting the intersecting pressures of public scrutiny, private revelation, and sustained deception, and underscoring the ways in which human behavior, once revealed, produces ripple effects across multiple relational, social, and ethical domains. The interplay of confession, corroboration, and emotional confrontation revealed the full complexity of the situation, demonstrating how acts of sustained deceit affect psychological well-being, relational stability, and social perception, while also illustrating the intricate dynamics of moral accountability, personal agency, and emotional resilience in contexts of intense relational disruption. Every moment, from whispered accusations to tearful confrontations, added to the dense narrative of human behavior under pressure, producing a scenario in which the consequences of duplicity were immediate, multifaceted, and enduring, and where accountability, emotional processing, and ethical negotiation were inextricably linked, creating a rich and complex tapestry of relational, emotional, and social consequences that would reverberate far beyond the immediate space and time of the unfolding events, shaping the personal, relational, and public trajectories of everyone involved. Each interaction, confession, and emotional response further complicated the dynamics, highlighting the interplay of trust, deception, emotional investment, and social scrutiny, and demonstrating that sustained secrecy carries ramifications that extend far beyond the original act, affecting relational networks, moral judgment, and public perception in ways that are both profound and enduring, creating a scenario in which the full weight of human behavior, ethical responsibility, and relational consequence is rendered in stark and undeniable clarity. The evening's revelations, evidence, and emotional exchanges thus constituted a dense, multi-layered exploration of the consequences of sustained deception, the complexity of human emotion, and the intricate interplay of accountability, trust, and social perception, producing a narrative that was at once intensely personal, publicly resonant, and ethically compelling, leaving all participants and viewers to grapple with the far-reaching implications of betrayal, the enduring consequences of dishonesty, and the profound challenges inherent in navigating the intertwined domains of personal morality, relational trust, and public scrutiny. The tension in the room had reached a level that was nearly tangible, a suffocating, almost physical weight that pressed on everyone present, as if the very air had become denser with the gravity of Kirk's confessions and Jasmine's corroborating evidence, each revelation a meticulously documented testament to years of hidden encounters, secret messages, and undisclosed intentions that had unfolded under the guise of normalcy while Rashida lived a life of trust, loyalty and devotion, never suspecting the duplicity that had silently infiltrated her world. Every glance, every gesture, every word exchanged carried a magnitude of consequence that amplified the emotional intensity, making every moment feel simultaneously slow and urgent, a paradox of time stretching and contracting as the participants navigated the explosive mixture of grief, betrayal, and disbelief. Rashida's voice was tight with emotion, cracking under the strain as she demanded answers, clarity, and accountability, her hands gripping the edge of the table as though holding on physically might anchor her against the tidal wave of shock and rage threatening to engulf her, each demand a reminder to Kirk that the web of deception he had woven could no longer shield him from confrontation or consequence. Jasmine, standing with a combination of vindication and defensiveness, wielded her evidence with precision, the texts, photographs, and voicemails she had painstakingly collected forming an unassailable chronology of deception, forcing Kirk to acknowledge not only the existence of the hidden relationship, but also the deliberate and sustained nature of his actions, the calculated decisions that had allowed the affair to persist for years without detection. The presence of cameras and production crew transformed the intimate, devastating confrontation into a performative space, where the private anguish and moral reckoning of the participants were amplified, for an audience that was both voyeuristic and participatory, ensuring that every sigh, tear, accusation, and defensive retort would be captured, scrutinized, and replayed across social media platforms, magnifying the consequences and the exposure of the emotional and ethical fallout. Scrappy's condemnation cut through the room like a knife, his disappointment and anger evident in every word. "You allowed us all to defend you publicly while living this hidden life. Did you ever consider the weight of what you were doing to everyone around you?" His voice resonated with a moral authority born of intimate knowledge and relational proximity, underscoring that the consequences of betrayal extend far beyond the immediate dyad, impacting friendships, family, and broader social networks. Carly Red, along with other cast members, echoed similar sentiments, their whispered judgments and visible reactions forming a chorus of collective moral scrutiny, reminding Kirk that the ramifications of sustained deception were not contained to private spaces but reverberated through every relationship and social interaction he maintained. The pressure intensified as Rashida demanded a comprehensive timeline of every interaction, every message, every instance of secrecy and concealment, insisting on transparency that would illuminate the full scope of his betrayal, her insistence functioning both as a method of psychological processing and a mechanism of moral arbitration, reclaiming agency in a situation where she had been systematically manipulated. Kirk's responses, a mixture of halting confession, partial justification, and moments of visible remorse, reflected the cognitive and emotional burden of living a dual life, illustrating the internal conflict that arises when deception is maintained over extended periods and ultimately exposed under conditions of scrutiny, confrontation, and moral evaluation. The revelations prompted by Jasmine's insistence added layers of complexity and intensity, as the deliberate timing, location, and frequency of interactions were disclosed, revealing patterns of manipulation and intentional concealment that exacerbated the emotional devastation experienced by Rashida and amplified the public perception of Kirk's betrayal. Every disclosure acted as a catalyst for further confrontation, each piece of evidence, each message, each photograph adding to the cumulative weight of moral and emotional reckoning, forcing Kirk to confront not only the immediate consequences of his actions, but also the broader relational and ethical implications that would ripple outward to affect friends, castmates, family, and a public audience increasingly invested in the narrative. The room functioned as both a stage and a crucible, where personal integrity, relational trust, and moral judgment were continuously tested under the intense scrutiny of cameras, social media amplification, and the unyielding presence of those directly impacted by the betrayal, creating an environment in which concealment, denial, or minimization were no longer viable options. Rashida's ability to navigate this complex terrain, articulating grief, rage, and the demand for accountability, highlighted her role as both central emotional figure and moral arbiter, guiding the narrative through a landscape of ethical complexity and relational devastation. While Kirk struggled to reconcile public scrutiny, personal guilt, and the relational fallout from his sustained deception, Jasmine's participation further complicated the dynamics, demonstrating how acts of deception are rarely contained to a single dyad and instead create multifaceted consequences that impact multiple parties simultaneously, influencing perceptions, moral evaluations, and relational alliances in ways that are intricate and often unpredictable. Kirk's fluctuating expressions of remorse, shame, defensiveness, and occasional attempts at justification highlighted the psychological complexity inherent in sustaining a double life, illustrating how prolonged deception affects not only interpersonal relationships, but also self-perception, ethical reasoning, and the capacity for authentic emotional engagement. The interplay of confession, corroboration, and emotional confrontation created a layered and dynamic narrative, demonstrating the intricate consequences of betrayal, the cascading effects of dishonesty, and the challenges of moral accountability in highly visible relational networks. As the evening progressed, the combination of evidence, emotional exposure, and social amplification produced a scenario in which the ramifications of sustained deception became increasingly evident, highlighting the ways in which private acts, once revealed, extend their influence across relational, social, and cultural domains, affecting perceptions, alliances, and moral judgments far beyond the immediate participants. Rashida's insistence on full disclosure and accountability functioned as both a personal coping mechanism and a form of moral arbitration, compelling Kirk to confront not only the tangible evidence of his betrayal but also the broader ethical, relational, and social consequences that had resulted from years of hidden behavior. Each moment of confrontation, each demand for explanation, and each emotional outburst contributed to a densely layered tableau of human behavior, moral consequence, and relational complexity, illustrating how acts of duplicity generate multifaceted repercussions that extend far beyond the initial context, reshaping social networks, ethical perceptions, and public narratives in enduring ways. The exposure of Kirk's actions, amplified by Jasmine's corroboration and the continuous presence of cameras and producers, created a crucible of emotional and moral intensity, forcing participants to navigate the intersections of personal integrity, relational trust, public perception, and ethical accountability under conditions of sustained stress, scrutiny, and revelation. The continuous flow of confessions, evidence, and emotional responses illuminated the psychological, relational, and social dimensions of betrayal, illustrating the profound impact of sustained deception on individual well-being, interpersonal dynamics, and broader networks of social perception. Rashida's responses, ranging from grief to righteous anger, demonstrated the complexity of processing relational trauma in a public, scrutinized environment, while Kirk's attempts at mitigation and explanation underscored the difficulties inherent in reconciling internal perception with external judgment in contexts of ethical violation and relational collapse. The multi-layered narrative, shaped by confession, corroboration, and confrontation, highlighted the intricate interplay between personal action, relational consequence, and public scrutiny, demonstrating how sustained deception generates cascading effects across psychological, social, and ethical domains, and illustrating the complexity of navigating accountability, emotional processing, and relational negotiation in highly visible and morally charged circumstances. The evidence introduced throughout the night, coupled with the unrelenting emotional exposure, created a scenario in which the consequences of duplicity were not only immediate but also enduring, influencing relational trajectories, social alliances, and public perceptions in ways that were complex, unpredictable, and profoundly impactful. Every interaction, confession, and emotional display contributed to a dense, interconnected web of cause and effect, illustrating the far-reaching consequences of deception and the intricate dynamics of human behavior, ethical responsibility, and relational interdependence in contexts characterized by sustained concealment, moral ambiguity, and public visibility. Through the intense scrutiny, continuous revelation, and emotional confrontation, the narrative unfolded as a comprehensive examination of betrayal, moral accountability, and relational complexity, offering insight into the psychological, social, and ethical ramifications of sustained dishonesty and highlighting the enduring impact of hidden actions once they are exposed, reshaping the lives, perceptions, and moral frameworks of all involved. Rashida's capacity to navigate grief, demand clarity, and assert moral authority provided a stabilizing axis within the chaos, demonstrating how individuals negotiate agency, ethical evaluation, and relational reconstruction in the aftermath of profound betrayal. The sustained exposure to evidence, emotional confrontation, and public scrutiny created a multidimensional scenario in which personal, relational, and social consequences were inseparable, illustrating the interconnectedness of individual actions, moral responsibility, and social perception. and underscoring the enduring impact of deception when revealed under conditions of intense relational and public visibility. Every detail, from whispered accusations to tearful confrontations, from evidence presented to confessions reluctantly given, contributed to a narrative that was dense, emotionally charged, and morally complex, capturing the profound and far-reaching consequences of sustained duplicity on individual identity, relational networks, and public perception, and revealing the intricate interplay of human behavior, ethical accountability, and social scrutiny in the wake of betrayal. The events of the night thus formed a dense, multi-layered exploration of human behavior, relational dynamics, and moral consequence, illustrating how acts of sustained deception ripple outward to affect psychological well-being, relational integrity, and social judgment, creating a scenario in which accountability, emotional processing, and ethical reflection are inextricably intertwined, producing a narrative of extraordinary intensity, complexity, and enduring significance that extends far beyond the immediate participants and the immediate moment. The room was charged with an intensity that seemed almost impossible to endure, each second stretching into eternity as Kirk sat facing the undeniable evidence of his long-hidden transgressions, the weight of years of secrecy pressing down with a suffocating force, while Rashida's grief and anger radiated with a rawness that left everyone present in stunned silence. The emotional impact amplified by Jasmine's meticulous documentation, every message, voicemail, and photograph a testament to the deliberate and sustained nature of Kirk's betrayal, creating a tableau of relational devastation that was both intimate and impossible to ignore. Every glance, every subtle shift in posture, every tremor in voice carried the burden of truth, each participant caught in a complex web of emotions that included shock, disbelief, sorrow, and moral outrage, a mixture that rendered rational discussion nearly impossible as the reality of years of deceit came crashing into the present moment with relentless force. Rashida's voice, though occasionally breaking, was unwavering in its demand for clarity, for a complete account of every instance, every decision, and every moment in which Kirk had chosen secrecy and dishonesty over honesty and commitment, her insistence functioning both as a psychological anchor and a form of moral adjudication, reclaiming control in a scenario that had been dominated by deception. Jasmine, simultaneously vindicated and defensive, wielded her evidence with precision, ensuring that the narrative of betrayal could not be diminished or dismissed, each text, photograph, and voicemail serving as both proof and indictment, leaving Kirk with little room to evade accountability. The cameras and production crew, ever present and intrusive, heightened the stakes, transforming what might have been a private confrontation into a performative spectacle, where the pain, the accusations, and the emotional reckoning were amplified for public consumption, ensuring that every nuance of the interaction would be preserved, dissected, and replayed by audiences who had long invested emotionally in the lives of those involved, projecting their own expectations, judgments, and allegiances onto the unfolding drama. Scrappy's condemnation was particularly cutting, his disappointment sharpened by intimate knowledge of Kirk's character and the trust he had placed in him over the years, his words resonating with moral authority and personal frustration. "You allowed us all to defend you, to stand by you publicly, while you lived this hidden life. Did you ever consider the people who trusted you, who believed in you?" His voice echoed the collective incredulity of the room, amplified by Carly Red and others whose whispered commentary and visible reactions created a chorus of moral judgment that left Kirk exposed not only to personal condemnation but to social and relational consequences that extended far beyond the immediate participants. The relentless progression of revelations intensified the emotional pressure, as Rashida demanded full disclosure, insisting on an exhaustive timeline that accounted for every clandestine encounter, every withheld truth, and every decision that had enabled the deception to continue unchecked. Her demand functioning as both a coping mechanism and a means of regaining agency in a situation that had stripped her of trust, certainty, and emotional security. Kirk's responses were a mixture of stammered confession, partial explanation, and attempts at justification, each word revealing the cognitive and emotional burden of maintaining a dual life, and illustrating the psychological complexity of sustained deceit, where guilt, shame, and self-interest collide with moral responsibility and relational expectation, producing a tension that is difficult to navigate and impossible to contain. Jasmine's contributions further complicated the narrative, highlighting the intricate web of responsibility, consent, and consequence, demonstrating that while she had participated in the relationship, the orchestration and concealment were fundamentally Kirk's choices, a dynamic that intensified the moral and relational reckoning while underscoring the ripple effects of deception across multiple relationships and social networks. The continuous introduction of evidence, from intimate messages to detailed accounts of secret meetings, created a relentless accumulation of moral and emotional pressure, compelling Kirk to confront the full scope of his actions and their impact on every person connected to the situation. While Rashida processed layers of grief, betrayal, and anger that demanded acknowledgement, validation, and resolution, the room itself became a crucible, a space where personal integrity, relational trust, and public perception collided with the intensity of sustained scrutiny. Each participant forced to navigate the intersecting demands of emotional expression, ethical accountability, and social consequence, creating a dynamic in which concealment, denial, or minimization were no longer viable options. Rashida's insistence on transparency and accountability positioned her as both moral arbiter and emotional anchor, guiding the unfolding narrative through grief, confrontation, and ethical evaluation. While Kirk struggled to reconcile the pressures of public exposure, personal guilt, and relational consequences, revealing the complex interplay between action, consequence, and perception in the context of long-term deception, every revelation brought with it additional layers of complexity, exposing patterns of manipulation, concealment, and premeditation that intensified the emotional and moral stakes, forcing all present to navigate a landscape marked by grief, disbelief, and ethical confrontation, where every reaction contributed to the broader understanding of the consequences of betrayal. The presence of cameras and the awareness of public scrutiny amplified the intensity, as each emotional response was not merely a private expression but a performative act with consequences for social perception, relational dynamics, and moral evaluation, ensuring that the participants were continuously negotiating both internal and external pressures. Scrappy, Carly, Red, and others provided not only commentary but also a framework of collective judgment, articulating the social and moral implications of the betrayal, reinforcing that deception carries consequences far beyond the immediate dyad, affecting friendships, public trust, and relational cohesion in profound ways. As the evening unfolded, Kirk's attempts at explanation were repeatedly challenged by Jasmine's precise presentation of evidence, compelling him to acknowledge not only individual acts of infidelity but the sustained nature of his duplicity, and the intentional decisions that facilitated the continuation of the secret relationship. Each piece of evidence, each confession, and each emotional reaction contributed to an escalating scenario in which the consequences of deception became increasingly complex and fair, illustrating how hidden actions, once exposed, reverberate across multiple dimensions of human interaction, from personal identity and relational trust to social perception and moral judgment. Rashida's navigation of grief, anger, and the demand for accountability demonstrated the multidimensional impact of betrayal, highlighting the interplay between personal agency, ethical evaluation, and relational restoration, while Kirk's fluctuating expressions of shame, defensiveness, and sporadic remorse revealed the psychological toll of long-term deception and the difficulties inherent in reconciling self-perception with public and relational judgment. Jasmine's insistence on corroboration and specificity ensured that the narrative of betrayal could not be minimized, her methodical presentation of evidence functioning both as validation of her experience and as a mechanism to hold Kirk fully accountable, emphasizing the deliberate nature of his concealment and the calculated choices that had sustained the deception over time. The combined effect of confessions, evidence, and emotional confrontation created a scenario that was both intensely personal and publicly resonant, demonstrating the intricate consequences of sustained duplicity and the cascading effects of betrayal on relational, social, and ethical planes. The room became a dense network of emotional, moral, and relational consequences, with each participant negotiating grief, anger, judgment, and responsibility in real time, underscoring the profound and far-reaching implications of exposure, accountability, and ethical reckoning. The continuous layering of revelations intensified the psychological and relational complexity, forcing Kirk to confront not only the immediate consequences of his actions but the broader social, emotional, and moral repercussions that extended beyond the immediate circle, illustrating the interconnectedness of personal behavior, relational trust, and public perception. Rashida's demands for clarity, her articulation of moral expectations, and her emotional responses provided both a framework for processing betrayal and a mechanism for moral adjudication, guiding the narrative through the intertwined challenges of grief, ethical evaluation, and relational reconstruction, while simultaneously highlighting the enduring consequences of sustained deception. The interplay of confession, corroboration, and emotional expression created a narrative that was dense, multifaceted, and relentlessly compelling, demonstrating how acts of sustained deceit affect psychological well-being, relational integrity, and social perception, producing consequences that are both immediate and enduring, deeply personal and widely social, morally significant and emotionally charged. Every tear, every accusation, and every reluctant admission contributed to a richly layered account of human behavior under ethical strain, revealing the intricate dynamics of trust, deception, and moral accountability, and underscoring the ways in which sustained secrecy and betrayal produce cascading effects across relational, social, and cultural networks. The night's events exemplified the profound complexity of navigating exposure, accountability, and relational repair in the aftermath of prolonged deception, illustrating how the interplay of personal action, evidence, emotional response, and social scrutiny produces a narrative of extraordinary intensity and enduring significance, reshaping the lives, perceptions, and moral frameworks of all involved in ways that are both immediate and lasting, emotionally raw and morally compelling, intimately personal and publicly resonant, a scenario in which the consequences of betrayal are unavoidable, multifaceted, and deeply transformative. The night had taken on a surreal quality, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the tension, the silence punctuated only by the occasional gasp, the sharp intake of breath, or the trembling of hands that gripped whatever could provide a semblance of stability amidst the chaos, a chaos born from the unraveling of years-long deception and the raw exposure of emotions that had been meticulously concealed until now. Kirk sat rigidly, a mixture of shame, guilt, and desperation etched across his face, as he faced the cumulative weight of Jasmine's evidence, each piece a stark, undeniable reflection of choices he had made, actions he had taken, and a secret world he had maintained in the shadows, while Rashida, unaware and trusting, navigated a reality constructed around honesty, love, and commitment. The depth of the betrayal extended far beyond the mere mechanics of an affair. It touched on trust, family dynamics, friendships, and the fragile structures of social perception that the entire cast and audience had come to rely upon, making every revelation a shockwave that reverberated outward, altering relationships and perceptions with unrelenting force. Rashida's presence, her anguish and indignation, formed the emotional epicenter of the room, her words slicing through pretense and denial, demanding a level of accountability that left no corner untouched and no rationalization unchallenged, insisting that Kirk not only acknowledge the actions themselves but also the intentionality behind each deceitful act, the premeditation that had allowed secrecy to flourish for years without consequence. Jasmine's involvement further intensified the situation, her detailed timeline, collected messages, and corroborating evidence acting as both shield and sword, validating her own role while simultaneously holding Kirk fully accountable. Each disclosure a reminder of the meticulous planning and deliberate concealment that had characterized their clandestine relationship. The cameras and production crew, capturing every nuance, every tear, every rising inflection of voice, turned the intimate confrontation into a public spectacle, amplifying the consequences and ensuring that the emotional intensity and moral reckoning would reach a far wider audience, a reality that added layers of pressure and performance to an already volatile scenario. Scrappy's voice, edged with disappointment and moral indignation, pierced the heavy air, articulating a collective sense of betrayal that extended beyond the immediate couple, resonating with the broader social network of friends, colleagues, and viewers who had long invested emotionally in the public personas and relational narratives of those involved. You built this entire facade while we all stood behind you. Did you ever think about what it would do to the people who trusted you? To the ones who believed in every word. The question hung in the air, unanswerable, yet impossible to ignore, underscoring the profound social consequences of actions once concealed and now brought into unrelenting light. Carly, Red, and other cast members, while less vocal, provided subtle but powerful reinforcement of moral judgment, their reactions, whispers, and glances constructing a network of collective accountability that left Kirk cornered emotionally, socially, and ethically, forced to confront the full spectrum of fallout from his choices. Rashida's demands for full disclosure escalated as the night progressed, her insistence on understanding the chronology, the frequency, and the context of each secret interaction transforming the room into a space where truth could no longer be postponed or manipulated, where every omission, every rationalization, every half-truth would be scrutinized and weighed against the meticulously documented reality Jasmine presented. Kirk's responses, faltering and conflicted, revealed the psychological complexity inherent in sustaining deception over time, a cognitive and emotional balancing act that collapses under confrontation, exposing both moral failings and the internal dissonance generated by a double life, while simultaneously highlighting the intricate human struggle between guilt and the desire for forgiveness or absolution. Jasmine's role was equally critical, embodying the duality of participant and witness. Her careful curation of evidence not only validating her experience but also constructing a moral architecture within which Kirk's actions could be fully assessed, leaving little room for misinterpretation or evasion, a structure that demanded acknowledgement, confrontation, and, ultimately, some form of accountability. The cumulative effect of messages, photographs, voicemails, and recollections functioned as a relentless narrative machine, propelling the confrontation forward with escalating intensity, compelling emotional responses from all present, and ensuring that the exposure of long-hidden truths was both comprehensive and inescapable. Each revelation, each demand for clarification, each tear and rising voice acted as a catalyst, magnifying the consequences and underscoring the complex interplay of trust, betrayal, and relational responsibility, while also illustrating the profound psychological impact on those forced to navigate the terrain of public and private scrutiny simultaneously. The presence of production elements, cameras, microphones, created an inescapable performative layer, converting raw emotional exchanges into documented spectacle, a reality that magnified anxiety, stress, and self-consciousness, creating a feedback loop in which every word and reaction carried amplified significance, influencing not only interpersonal dynamics but also public perception and social judgment. Scrappy, Carly Red, and other observers functioned as both moral witnesses and amplifiers of consequence, their presence reinforcing the ethical weight of each revelation and amplifying the emotional intensity, creating a scenario in which the personal and social ramifications of deceit were inseparable, and where the stakes of confession, accountability, and reconciliation were dramatically heightened. As the night unfolded, the interweaving of confession, corroboration, and confrontation produced a densely layered narrative, each new detail revealing not only the mechanics of betrayal but also the cascading consequences that touched every facet of relational, social, and moral life, illustrating the profound complexity of human behavior in situations of sustained deceit. Rashida's articulation of grief, anger, and the demand for clarity functioned both as an emotional catharsis and as a form of moral arbitration, guiding the participants and observers through the intricate terrain of relational repair, ethical judgment, and psychological processing. While Kirk navigated the intersecting pressures of public scrutiny, personal guilt, and relational fallout, revealing the profound psychological cost of duplicity sustained over years. Jasmine's insistence on specificity and corroboration ensured that the narrative could not be minimized or reframed, compelling Kirk to confront the deliberate nature of his actions, the intentional concealment, and the ethical implications of sustained deception, highlighting the complex interplay between individual choice, relational trust, and social consequence. The cumulative weight of evidence and emotional confrontation created a scenario in which the consequences of sustained deceit were fully visible, immediate, and enduring, influencing not only the lives and perceptions of those directly involved, but also the broader social networks, public understanding, and cultural narratives surrounding trust, betrayal, and accountability. Each tear, each accusation, each reluctant confession contributed to a rich, multi-layered examination of human behavior, moral responsibility, and relational dynamics, revealing the complex consequences of sustained dishonesty and the profound challenges inherent in navigating exposure, accountability, and ethical reflection under conditions of high emotional and social intensity. Rashida's navigation of grief, moral judgment, and relational negotiation underscored the centrality of agency, ethical evaluation, and emotional resilience in the aftermath of betrayal, while Kirk's fluctuating expressions of shame, defensiveness, and sporadic remorse highlighted the psychological complexity of long-term duplicity and the difficulties of reconciling internal perception with external judgment. Jasmine's carefully curated evidence and insistence on transparency provided structure, validation, and moral clarity within an otherwise chaotic emotional environment, ensuring that the consequences of deception were comprehensively addressed and leaving little room for denial or minimization. The combined forces of confession, corroboration, and continuous emotional exposure generated a scenario of extraordinary intensity, demonstrating the intertwined nature of personal behavior, relational consequence, and social perception, and illustrating the enduring and far-reaching ramifications of sustained deceit across psychological, relational, and ethical dimensions. Each participant's actions, reactions, and emotional responses contributed to a dense, interconnected web of consequences, producing a narrative in which the revelation of hidden actions catalyzed cascading effects, reshaping trust, alliances, and public perception in ways that were complex, unpredictable, and profoundly impactful. Rashida's presence as moral and emotional anchor guided the unfolding events, asserting agency, demanding accountability, and providing a framework for understanding and processing the betrayal, while Kirk confronted the unavoidable exposure of his duplicity and the intricate social, relational, and moral consequences it generated. The relentless layering of evidence, emotional confrontation, and moral evaluation illustrated the cascading nature of relational and ethical consequences, highlighting the interconnectedness of trust, deception, and social perception, and demonstrating how sustained secrecy produces ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate participants. Every revelation, every accusation, and every tear contributed to a richly textured narrative of human behavior, ethical accountability, and relational complexity, illustrating how prolonged deception generates multidimensional consequences that affect psychological well-being, social cohesion, and moral evaluation, leaving a lasting impact on all involved. Through the intricate interplay of confession, corroboration, and emotional processing, the night's events became a comprehensive exploration of betrayal, ethical responsibility, and relational dynamics, revealing the far-reaching and enduring consequences of sustained deception, the profound challenges of moral accountability, and the complex psychological, social, and ethical terrain that must be navigated when hidden truths are exposed under intense public and relational scrutiny. Rashida's ability to articulate grief, assert moral authority, and demand clarity served as both a stabilizing force and a guiding framework, ensuring that the narrative remained focused on accountability, transparency, and emotional processing, while Kirk's responses highlighted the psychological cost and relational consequences of maintaining a dual life over time. Jasmine's methodical approach ensured that the truth could not be denied or diminished, reinforcing the deliberate nature of Kirk's actions and the moral and relational imperatives of acknowledging and addressing the consequences of sustained deception. The cumulative weight of evidence, confession, and emotional expression created a dense, multi-layered narrative that illuminated the profound and enduring effects of betrayal on personal identity, relational integrity, and social perception, illustrating the complex interplay of trust, deception, and moral accountability, and underscoring the far-reaching and lasting impact of exposure and confrontation in scenarios characterized by long-term duplicity. Every emotional display, every reluctant admission, every corroborated fact contributed to a scenario in which the consequences of deceit were immediate, multifaceted, and enduring, revealing the intricate web of human behavior, relational consequence, and ethical responsibility that defines the aftermath of sustained betrayal, creating a narrative of extraordinary emotional and moral complexity that reshapes the lives, perceptions, and moral frameworks of all involved in profound and lasting ways. The events you've just witnessed are nothing short of earth-shattering, leaving a trail of emotional devastation, moral reckoning, and unrelenting questions about trust, loyalty, and accountability that will echo far beyond this room and into the lives of everyone connected to this saga. Rashida's pain, her unwavering demand for answers, and her courage in confronting a betrayal that spanned years serve as a powerful reminder that trust, once broken, requires not only truth but courage, clarity, and confrontation to even begin the process of repair. Kirk's long-hidden choices, now laid bare under the unforgiving gaze of Jasmine's evidence and the scrutiny of friends, family, and the public, demonstrate how deception, even when veiled under the guise of normalcy, inevitably resurfaces with consequences that touch every corner of one's life. This story is a stark illustration of the far-reaching ripples of betrayal, showing how personal choices reverberate across relationships, social networks, and public perception, altering lives in ways that cannot be undone and leaving indelible marks on everyone involved. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the family was left divided, a living testament to the reality that when secrets fester for years, the eventual exposure is as dramatic as it is unavoidable. The intensity of this confrontation, captured in every glance, tear, and rising inflection of voice, gives us all a glimpse into the complicated emotional terrain of human relationships when trust is violated and kept hidden for extended periods. It's not just a story about a secret relationship, it's a lesson about accountability, honesty, and the unavoidable consequences of our actions. A narrative that resonates with anyone who has ever been betrayed, witnessed betrayal, or struggled to rebuild after trust was shattered. Every text, voicemail, and photograph presented by Jasmine serves not only as evidence but as a mirror reflecting the profound human consequences of duplicity. A cautionary tale of how secrecy and dishonesty corrode the foundation of trust and leave those around us navigating a landscape of confusion, hurt, and moral questioning. As viewers, you are not mere spectators, you are participants in processing this drama, weighing the actions, judging the consequences, and reflecting on the lessons that emerge when private choices become public knowledge. The story invites a deeper consideration of how we manage our relationships, the importance of transparency, and the courage required to confront uncomfortable truths, whether about others or ourselves. Rashida's unwavering stance and Jasmine's meticulous documentation provide a framework for understanding the intricate dynamics of betrayal and the multifaceted nature of accountability, offering viewers a lens through which to examine their own relationships, ethical boundaries, and responses to dishonesty. The public nature of this revelation reminds us all that actions hidden in the shadows cannot remain there indefinitely, that the truth, when it surfaces, has the power to reshape social bonds, reputations, and self-perception in ways that are profound and irreversible. Every participant in this saga, from Kirk to Rashida to Jasmine and the surrounding friends and family, embodies a different facet of human reaction to anger, grief, vindication, moral judgment, and the complex navigation of relational repair. As this story continues to unfold in the public eye, it raises enduring questions. Will trust ever be restored? Can relationships survive this level of exposure and moral reckoning? What lessons will be carried forward by those who watched, those who lived it, and those who were touched indirectly through social media and public commentary? Your voice, as a viewer, matters in this conversation. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Rashida's shoes? How do you navigate the tension between forgiveness and accountability? How much weight do years of hidden behavior carry in evaluating someone's character and trustworthiness? Liking this video ensures you stay connected to the ongoing developments. Subscribing allows you to witness firsthand how this complex narrative unfolds. And commenting actively engages you in a community grappling with the same questions, judgments, and emotional responses that the participants themselves are experiencing. This is more than reality TV drama. It's an exploration of human behavior, ethical boundaries, and the social consequences of betrayal. Every reaction, every analysis, and every perspective contributes to a broader understanding of trust, responsibility, and emotional resilience in the face of revelation. Stay engaged, stay reflective, and remember that your insights add value to the ongoing discourse surrounding these events, providing a space for conversation, judgment, and empathy to coexist. The story of Kirk, Rashida, and Jasmine is a living, breathing case study in the power of secrets, the inevitability of truth, and the complex emotional landscape that emerges when years of concealed actions are finally exposed. By participating in this discussion, you are not only observing the unraveling of a dramatic revelation but also contributing to a wider dialogue about human behavior, relational ethics, and the societal impact of hidden transgressions. Every like, comment, and subscription strengthens the community of viewers who are committed to examining, understanding, and learning from the consequences of actions that are finally brought to light, reinforcing the significance of accountability and the enduring relevance of truth in shaping relationships and reputations. Your engagement drives awareness, sparks conversation, and ensures that stories like these are not only witnessed but also thoughtfully considered, analyzed, and understood in their full complexity, bridging the gap between personal experience, public narrative, and collective reflection. By commenting, you join a dialogue that encourages honesty, moral reflection, and active participation in evaluating human behavior and relational dynamics, fostering a space where viewers can share perspectives, insights, and emotional responses to the intense drama unfolding before them. Subscribing ensures that you stay informed about the continuing saga, the developments, and the aftermath of these revelations, allowing you to witness accountability, reconciliation, and ongoing consequences as they evolve in real time. Liking the video amplifies the conversation, signaling your recognition of the significance of the events, the courage it took to confront betrayal, and the importance of public dialogue in unpacking the ramifications of sustained deceit. As this story continues, your involvement transforms passive viewing into active engagement, connecting you with others who are navigating the same questions about trust, betrayal, morality, and the human capacity for forgiveness and resilience. The saga of Kirk's admissions, Rashida's confrontations, and Jasmine's evidence is not merely entertainment. It is an exploration of the intricate web of human relationships, moral responsibility, and the enduring impact of hidden truths. By participating in the comments, subscribing, and liking, you help to document, discuss, and understand the profound lessons embedded in these dramatic events, contributing to a collective reflection on trust, ethics, and the consequences of our actions, ensuring that this story resonates far beyond the walls of this room and the immediacy of its public exposure. Engage, reflect, and let your voice be part of the ongoing conversation about betrayal, accountability, and the human capacity to confront, understand, and, ultimately, navigate the aftermath of hidden actions revealed. This is your opportunity to weigh in, to express judgment, empathy, and insight, and to be an active participant in a narrative that is as much about public scrutiny and moral consequence as it is about personal revelation and relational complexity. Every perspective shared strengthens the dialogue, ensuring that the lessons of accountability, honesty, and emotional resilience reach far beyond the individuals involved, resonating with all who watch, reflect, and respond to this extraordinary story of secrets revealed, trust broken, and the complex path toward understanding and resolution.